Hey there, this is Extra Healthy-ish, your big sister podcast to the one called Just Healthy-ish. Both podcasts from Body+Soul are aimed to give you that little bit extra in your day. I'm your host, Felicity Hartley. It's October, and most of us know that that means it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Now, recently, the National Breast Cancer Foundation warned that COVID has resulted in delays in diagnosis and treatment of the most common cancer in Australia, and they fear that this will have lasting consequences. My guest today is Gabriela Fearn. She's a yoga teacher, a family photographer, a doula, and a mum of two. She's also a breast cancer survivor, and she's on today because she wants to encourage other women to, yes, check their breasts. So let's hear from her harrowing story, but also uplifting as well. Gab, thank you so much for coming on Extra Healthy-ish. Now, how are you staying healthy? You've been in lockdown in Sydney. Thankfully, we're coming out. How have you stayed extra healthy-ish in lockdown?
Well, I've been trying to get on my mat every single day on my yoga mat. So I now just leave it unrolled on my bedroom floor. And because we're in lockdown, I've been in active wear every day. So it's really easy. Like if I have 5 minutes, I'm like, well, I'm already ready to go. And there's my mat. And so sometimes it's yoga, but it's not always. Like sometimes it's Pilates or a HIIT session or boxing or bar. The important thing to me is that whether I have 5 minutes or 45 minutes, I just try to move my body.
Now, you're a yoga teacher. What do you actually do when you I love the idea of just leaving your mat out. How genius.
Yes.
Do you just get on there and do a stretch every morning, or what does it look like every day?
I actually really like online videos. And I know that sounds funny because I'm a yoga teacher and I can do my own thing, but I have kids and I'm busy and I want someone else to tell me what to do and to lead me. So there's so much like virtual yoga right now, which is great, like live classes online, but there's also pre-recorded classes. And so that's what I do, whether it's for Pilates or bar or whatever. I just find a video online and go for it.
Yeah, I'm the same. And then you just kind of, you just Google and, does that take my fancy today? Or maybe I like that one.
Yeah. And it's by time. I'm like 15 minutes, shoulders, go.
Yep, 100%. Yeah. Now, we're talking about your breast cancer, well, dare I call it journey today. Take us back to when you initially found that lump. I know you briefly talked about it in Healthy-ish, but I'd love to hear it again because I think there's some great messaging in there for all women listening to this. How did you discover that something wasn't right with your breasts, and what happened from there?
Well, it was a long journey, to use your word. So I do have a family history. It's not a super strong family history, but two of my maternal aunts have had breast cancer. So it was always a little bit in the back of my mind to be aware of it. And in my very early 20s, I'd had an ultrasound on my left breast because it was a bit lumpy. And they said, oh, it's just cysts. So I kind of just ignored it. And but I was never confident in doing a self-breast exam, and I never had anyone do a breast exam on me. So I felt like I was kind of flying blind, so just a lot of uncertainty. And I did start asking for screening and was turned down because I was too young, and I tried to go into one of those mobile screening vans and was told, you're too young, you don't qualify. And then finally in June of 2020, so we were in the pandemic and lockdown, and I could feel something above my left nipple that it wasn't a lump, but it just felt different to the right side. The right side was soft and the left side was harder. It was like a thickening.
Was that when you later said in the shower? Were you feeling that, or were you just kind of knew it?
I don't think so. I think, I was feeling it, but I know the shower is a common place for people to feel it. I was probably like watching TV or something on the couch. I can't remember why.
Hello, boo. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's not right.
I'm going to feel, but yeah, I was like, it feels weird. And so my surgeon called it like a ridge. So I think that would be the best way to describe it, but it wasn't a lump. And so that's what sent me to the GP. And my GP said that it was probably nothing, but that she would send me for screening just to be safe. But she told me, not to worry. And so I went for an ultrasound and a mammogram. And then I got called back right after my mammogram saying that I needed to come in for a biopsy. And I started to freak out a bit, but I also did research and found that most biopsies come back normal. So I tried not to panic.
And then what happened? Talk us through that moment when you found out you had cancer, and what did it look like the next few days afterwards?
Well, that was also a bit of a roller coaster. So the first time I heard the word cancer was having my biopsy. The radiologist came in and I said, that, this is probably fine, right? I don't need to worry. And she just looked at me and said, I'm pretty sure that this is cancer, looking at your scans, and this, it's quite big, and I could be wrong, but I'm not usually wrong. So prepare yourself. And I was on my own because of COVID. And so I just kind of broke down and was crying and had to then leave and pay, and it was awful. And then went out to the street, and just the crazy lady who's sobbing in the waiting room. And my husband, so when I went out, my husband was there waiting for me because I texted him, and the kids were in the car, and he just held me, and it was raining, and I just cried and came home. And I just spent the next 3 days like lying on the floor and crying. I really thought that I was going to die. I knew that young women didn't have as good outcomes with breast cancer because their cancers are often found later. And the radiologist had told me that it was big. And so I just put two and two together and thought, this is the end. And I couldn't really function. My husband had to take care of the kids because I was totally useless. And then I saw the GP a couple of days later to get the results. And that day was actually a big relief to me because I was initially diagnosed with DCIS, which is ductal carcinoma in situ. So it's breast cancer that hasn't left the ducts. So it's considered a stage 0 cancer. But it's like I said, it was a roller coaster. Then a couple of days later, I met my surgeon, and she said, I don't think this is just a DCIS. I think that there might be a tumor hiding in there. And that she was right. So after my mastectomy pathology report came back, I was diagnosed with stage 1 triple positive breast cancer and DCIS.
So yes, it was a roller coaster, and you went straight in pretty quickly to surgery and chemo, and
extremely quickly, less than 2 weeks. Yeah, I was in surgery less than 2 weeks after being diagnosed.
And how did you mentally pull through afterwards, after the chemo treatments? How did you? Well, physically you're obviously wrecked, but how did you mentally get through the next few weeks? Or how long were your chemos for?
So I started chemo about a month after my mastectomy, and I had chemo for 12 weeks straight every week. Wow.
So how did you get through that?
I saw a psychologist at the hospital, and that was really helpful. And I would talk things out with my mom, my friends, and my husband. And spending time with my kids was actually really helpful because they're so funny and sweet, and they're really cute ages, and they just keep you so grounded in the present moment because they're quite narcissistic, and they don't really care what's happening with you. They just need you to be their mom. And so they're just very good distractions.
And you've been a yoga teacher for a decade. What role did yoga play in your journey, and how did you rely on, I suppose, all the tools that yoga might have taught you of how to get through life? How did they teach you to get through this experience? Well,
I'm definitely not one of those yogis who's up at 5 a.m. every morning and does 2 hours of yoga and drinks a kale juice. For me, yoga is much more about just knowing how to downregulate my nervous system and finding that mind-body connection and mindful movement. And so those things were really important to me throughout treatment. I remember right before my first mastectomy, I had to have an MRI, and I'd never had an MRI before. And you'll know that if you've had one, they're really noisy, and you're in this very confined space. And I wasn't in a very good headspace, obviously. I'd just been diagnosed. And so I was in there for about half an hour, and the whole time I was breathing deeply, and I was repeating this mantra that one of my yoga teachers had given me just over and over and over again. Through every chemo session, I would put on a guided meditation. I did a lot of restorative yoga, started doing gentle stretches like a week after my mastectomy, and just things like that. I tried to be really tender with myself, but also move my body and stretch and try to strengthen slowly through yoga.
But it obviously helped, right? It obviously...
So much.
Yeah. And what about...
Yeah, being able to calm yourself down is just really important.
We'll be back after this. What about having... you had both your breasts removed and reconstructed. Mm-hmm. How was this? How did it feel as a woman to lose your breasts and then... I suppose get fake ones, dare I say.
Yeah, no, I called them my foobs, my fake boobs.
Oh, I like that. Your foobs. I call them your foobs. Talk us through this. How did this feel? What was this like?
It was quite confronting, especially the first one. So that was the one that was out of my control. Fine. I wasn't given, some women are given an option, like you could have a lumpectomy or mastectomy. I wasn't. I was told that you have to have a mastectomy. So that was quite confronting to hear that at first. I have the best surgeon in the world and I love her, and she was very reassuring and I really trusted her, but it's still a lot to take in, and this part of your body that has been with you your whole life. And as a woman and in our culture, it's very much a part of our cultural ideals of beauty. And so it was a lot. They'd also breastfed my children, so it was, had some attachment to them. And on the other hand, I had a feeling that I knew that there was cancer in this breast, and so I just wanted it to be cut out as soon as possible. And as my friend said, chucked in the bin. So it was kind of both, like the sadness, but also like just get it out and put it in the bin. And now that I have 2 FUBs, the one thing that I didn't realize before going through this myself is that when you have a mastectomy, you lose all sensation on your breast. So I had a skin and nipple sparing mastectomy, but my skin and nipples have no sensation. And so that's kind of an unnerving
Must be bizarre.
feeling. It's really weird. It's very hard to explain. It's kind of like if you go to the dentist and then your mouth, part of your like skin and mouth is numb. Kind of feels like that. So if something bumps into it, you can feel it. But if I touch it, there's nothing. No sensation. On the bright side, I did breastfeed for 4 years. And so now the FUBs are quite perky, but it's not something that I would do for fun. And it's certainly not a free boob job, as some people sometimes say it is.
Yeah. And did you have what was some upsides of your journey? Like, was there times, that I suppose when you're at the top of the roller coaster, talk us through some of these times where you thought, because sometimes people go through these, battles in life and come out the other side and are grateful for certain things. Is there anything of this experience that you not happy for? I'm just trying to find the word. You know what I mean?
No, yeah. I no, definitely. I do know what you mean. And yes, actually there were many, and I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. And yet I do think experiences like this can make us better people. And that's a big call. But I found, for one, it was overwhelming the way that our community like rallied around us. And it was like, just moved me to tears some days, just the way that people helped us and loved us. And especially because I'm an expat. And so we do have my husband's family, but people knew that I didn't have my family, and just helped us so much with meals and cooking and cleaning and taking care of the kids, and just beautiful little gifts to lift my spirits. And it just really made me value community even more than I already did, and just realize just how absolutely beautiful people are.
I suppose, if you have got a friend, if you're listening to this and a friend is going through breast cancer, what was the things that really helped you that listeners can perhaps do for their friends? Because sometimes you feel quite helpless as a friend who...
Yeah, I think one of the best things that anyone did was early on, one of my friends started a page for me on a website called Lots of Helping Hands. So it coordinates help. So it kind of removes the burden of communication and organization from the person who is going through the hard time. So someone else kind of spearheads it. And then it's like a calendar. So people could say, like, I'm going to bring a meal on Monday. And so there were days so she could put up, like, Gabby needs a meal Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and someone to take her to chemo on Tuesday, and someone to pick up the kids on Thursday. And then people could volunteer for the different jobs. That was the most helpful thing for me. And I think also just really being there for them. And Lee Sales talks about this word, accompanying the person who's going through the hard time, and listening to them and just being there with them. And there's also, some things you can Google, like things not to say to a cancer patient. Like for breast cancer, you kind of hear the same things over and over again, like, well, at least you're young, or at least you got the good cancer, or at least you get a free boob job. And those are all not helpful.
Okay, good, noted. That's good advice. Yeah. And what does your treatment look like now? I mean, you've finished chemo. What's it look like now for you?
Thank you for asking, because this is another misconception around breast cancer. It does depend on the kind of breast cancer that you had, but for many women with breast cancer, treatment is ongoing. It doesn't end at the end of chemo. So I had Herceptin, which was an injection every 3 weeks for a year. And so I just finished that recently. And then because my cancer was triple positive, which means it was fed by estrogen and progesterone, I'm going to be taking medication for the next 5 to 10 years of my life. So essentially I've been put into a medical menopause for at least 5 years. And so that has pretty big side effects that affect my everyday life, like joint pain, weight gain, brain fog, and other fun menopause side effects that most 33-year-olds don't have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you got to shout out to those friends again, don't you? They sound like they'll be there for you. Yeah. And what's your advice for anyone who's faced with a health battle, not just there's breast cancer, but any health battle that seems so overwhelming when you get that first diagnosis? What is your advice for getting through?
Got a few things. The first is to stay off the internet because it will make you crazy. I spent way too much time the first few weeks Googling recurrence rates, survival statistics, ages, tumor sizes. Like, it was so bad for my mental health. So that's my first thing. Stay off the internet. Also see a psychologist, a therapist, a psychiatrist. And there's nothing wrong and there's no shame in needing help with your mental health, taking drugs that are there, like anti-anxiety medication, anti-depression medication. I think they all can have a role to play. And I also think it's really important to try to find other people who are going through what you're going through. And I found that really hard for me because it was COVID. None of the support groups were happening in person. And then because I'm pretty young to be going through breast cancer, I just never met anyone in person who was going through what I was going through, but there were groups on Facebook and Instagram and that kind of thing. And then back to the earlier point, is ask for help and just don't be afraid to reach out to the people who love you and are near you, and be really specific. And if someone says, how can I help you? I know this can be really hard, but just really try your best to be specific. Don't just go, oh, it's fine, I can do it. Say, like, can you buy me groceries tomorrow, please? Here's my list.
Yeah, absolutely.
People want to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Gabby, so we're so pleased that you're well, and thank you so much for coming on Extra Healthy-ish.
Thank you for having me.
I hope this chat with Gabby will inspire you to at least check your breasts in the shower, or perhaps go along to your GP and get them checked. It's wise to do that. Anyway, thank you for listening to this chat with Gabby. If you're after more awesome health and fitness and reassuring health advice, might I add, make sure you download other episodes of Extra Healthy-ish or our podcast Healthy-ish. You can also jump on our website www.bodyandsoul.com.au or follow us on Instagram or Facebook. Thanks again for tuning into this episode, and if you've got a chance, if you've got some time, please jump on and rate, review and subscribe to this podcast. And until tomorrow, check your breasts and stay extra healthy-ish.